Welcome, everybody. How is it going? It is October 9th, 2024. We're almost there, boys and girls. It's almost election day. And this is the RambleCast. I'm your host, Cody Toombs, and with me I have Corbin Davenport.
Hello.
Corbin, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. There is a massive hurricane over Florida as we are live, and the result of that is that a bunch of cool air is blasting around me. So this is the first day. Yesterday was the first day in a while like I could just have my windows open all day. So it's obviously not good for everyone in Florida, but weather's pretty nice here. If you're in Florida or you have friends or family affected in Florida, I hope they're staying safe. It's not a fun situation. We did have Hurricane Helene.
Yeah.
Helene, go through North Carolina, but it didn't really do a lot near me. It was just like a lot of rain for a couple hours. My power didn't even go out. So,
Ooh, nice.
yeah. Well, I kind of wanted it to go out for a little bit so I could stress test my UPS. So, you know, it's fine. I'll test it another day.
This is wow, this may be a new level of privilege.
Yeah.
When people complain that things aren't worse.
Yeah, well, it would have been nice to like see how it works, but that's okay.
No,
I mean, I know I can
I get
unplug
you.
the UPS to like test it, but that doesn't test like what happens to my internet necessarily. So, not trying to be insensitive. I'm just saying I wanted to try out the thing I spent like $80 on.
Okay, well then I will be briefly insensitive and say for all those people who think that the weather is being controlled by the government to do anything crazy. Have you considered that maybe the weather's being controlled by God and he's letting you know that he's not happy with Florida? Just saying.
I'm actually controlling the weather. I wasn't gonna talk about it here, but I do have control of the weather satellite, the laser satellite.
You heard it here first. Corbin is in league with QAnon.
Yeah.
He is not Q himself. He's just working with them.
Just association. Anyway, what do we have? What do we have up first?
Oh, after making those jokes, it really feels almost awkward to promptly switch into something that sounds almost conspiratorial. But China's hacking the US. So by the way, we're going to kind of fly through a few of these early topics, and thanks to Austin for suggesting a few of these. I already had a few of them up, but yeah, we can kick around a couple of these others too. So this one in particular, the super short version, which to be fair, there really isn't a long version of it yet. As if you're watching the background, you can see it's literally 2 paragraphs of story. But the basic summary is a hacker group in China supposedly or presumably has broken into AT&T, Verizon, and Lumen. It's funny because they refer to Lumen as a major U.S. telecommunication provider, and I gotta be honest, I don't know who that is. I don't think I know the name at all.
They're a regional ISP. I think that's one of the ones that just got bought by either T-Mobile or Verizon.
Oh, okay.
I forget which one. Yeah.
Nevertheless, we really don't know the extent of what they got. We don't know too many details. Apparently, they broke into the system for wiretapping. And is that mentioned? Okay, they do kind of reference it here, but not really. I saw it in another article that they mentioned basically they broke into the actual system for wiretaps, which is, sus. But at the same time, it's not clear how much they could actually get. So I don't think we're going to know the details of this anytime soon. I imagine the FBI is going to keep it under wraps. DHS is surely not going to want to talk about this. Neither organization is really known for being super chatty. So I think details are probably going to stay relatively hard to get. I did want to comment though. This is one of those perfect examples of a piece of advice that good software engineers know and good security experts will tell you. That piece of advice is make your data useless. If anyone tries to break into your databases, if anyone's trying to get data out of you, the most effective defense mechanism is just find ways to make the data useless or literally impossible to reach, or a combination of the two. That's the trick. Make it so anything that they could get, they would just look at and go, oh, that's it? That's all we can get out of here? Well, that sucks. And then they go away. For telecommunications companies, my question is, why haven't you done this? And I don't know, maybe they actually have, but we all know from T-Mobile that they haven't. T-Mobile proves time and time again that they're just like an open book with all the data anyone can ask for. So yeah, I'm just saying, please, major cellular carriers, make our data useless to anyone who steals it. And then you won't have to admit to people stealing it all the time. That's all. Corbin, any thoughts on this?
No, just that this is kind of the classic thing of not storing data you don't need, and also when you implement backdoors in any technology stack, there's always the chance that someone who is not you could get that. So maybe don't do that. That's just my thought.
Yeah. Common sense is anything but common. So, all right. Moving on. Let's talk about the Google Docs thing. You can explain this better than I can.
Yes, as soon as I find the tab. I don't know where it went. My desktop's still a little bit of a mess. Okay. So there's a siren outside. There's a new Google Docs feature that is kind of interesting. Google has added the ability for you to add document tabs to Google Docs. So basically what this looks like is, when you have I guess first I should say Google Docs used to just be like kind of Microsoft Word interface where you have like a page and the content will be split up by pages. And then a while back they added a freeform mode where there's just like a big text area, and that's where you type for all the times when like you don't really need your document to look like it's going to be printed on paper, because that's not how a lot of information word processing works anymore. So now they've expanded on that by adding tabs to this mode, so you can split your document into different basically it's you said this before the stream, but it's sort of like in Excel where you have a bunch of spreadsheets in your main like workbook document, and they're all like little individual pages. And that's what's in Google Docs now. So you can make a bunch of different sections in your docs. You can add custom emoji and titles to them, all that fun stuff. And yeah, it's kind of neat. At my job at How to Geek, we use internal wiki documentation thing called Coda. This looks almost exactly like that. So definitely like taking inspiration from a lot of like internal documentation wiki stuff. If you have a Google Doc or you have a Google Doc in your company that is just like a mile long and impossible to parse, this would probably be something good to use. Also, this is different than the thing that Google Docs and Word and other stuff has, where it will make it'll make like a navigation tree from your document headers. That's not what this is. It's like actually splitting your document into different sections. So it's just kind of neat. You might want to use that if you're making a big chungus Google Doc and you need to make it a little bit easier to parse. Also, great opportunity if you have like documentation or something that's split across like 50 Google Docs links, or like in a big folder you have to keep switching tabs. Just put them all in one thing with this.
I gotta admit, there's some part of me that really would be nervous about what happens if the formatting or like their internal format for this ever broke, because it feels oddly like it could be fragile, but at the same time,
yeah, I don't know. Their blog post doesn't say this, and I've not tried this. I don't know what happens when you like export this to like a Word file or something. Like, does it just make a Word file for each tab? I don't really know what happens there.
Yeah, though that obviously can't be their top concern. So, got to build features that are wanted by the users, not just try to stick to your many years ago competition. But yeah, I dig the idea of this. I love that they're doing it. And in ways I kind of want to use this just for my own purposes, not even like something I would share with anyone. But yeah, I don't know. It's neat. We'll see if I ever get around to using it, but it's a good thing they added it, because honestly, like, something I've wanted in docs for many years is basically sheets, like the ability just to do multiple sheets. So yeah, that's definitely a huge improvement. Okay, so I think that's it on that one, right?
Yep.
Like I said, gonna kind of fly through a few of these early topics. So Austin brought up that the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, I said that very weird, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, was awarded to 3 scientists for work on proteins. So two of the, I don't know if this is really what was meant to be highlighted, but 2 of these are Google employees, both working with Google DeepMind, and one of these is a guy from the University of Washington. They work together on basically the classic protein folding and how proteins work together. I am far from the right person to be talking in any depth about this, so I'm not going to try. But, congrats to Google for doing this. I mean, obviously, it's some specific people inside of Google who did the lion's share of the work, but I'm sure Google did a lot of funding for this. And the discoveries themselves are honestly going to go on to be pretty significant all of future, and until the Earth is burned up, which, it's 3:40 on October 9th, so we got a few hours. At least until the next hurricane rolls through and takes out the next state. But hey, good news. Do you have thoughts on this at all?
No.
Okay. So moving quickly on to the next thing. Trust me, we've got some long ones coming up, but these get to hit quickly. So we're going to talk about .io.
Yeah. So let me pull this up because I'm gonna mess this up. So the fun thing about website, when you look at a website, the part after the dot, like the .com or the .net or whatever, that's a top level domain, or TLD, and each of those is basically operated by someone, like a country, or someone or organization representing a country or a company or some other organization. Like I think the .com and .net, that's like under the sort of like US domain registrars. There's a bunch of country codes like co.uk or like .us or .ru for Russia and so on, that are sort of like generally run either by the country or like on behalf of the country, whatever. And a lot of those country codes end up being used for things that they're not supposed to be used for. So so like a .us domain, that'd be like something about the United States, or like a company based in the US, or or like .gov is like mostly a government, website, right? But there's a bunch of country codes that, because of how they're spelled, end up being used for other things. So I think it's the Federated States of Micronesia that has .fm, and so .fm domains get used a lot for like podcasts and stuff. And if you want to buy a .fm domain, they charge a lot of money because that country's realized that they could do that. Good for them. Just kind of a weird thing that happened with web domains. And one of those also weird things is the .io TLD was managed by the Chagos Islands, which is I'm sorry. It was
technically the Chagos Archipelago, but yes.
Right.
And it was actually the British, it's being handed over.
The .io
territory.
Yeah. So the British, So the .io TLD was managed by this, carried over like British colony, basically, on these islands, and so they are relinquishing control of those islands, which is good. I'd like to think this is an anti-colonialism show, so that's good. But that has the fun side effect of like that country code that the TLD is tied into will not exist anymore. Like the government structure, that like quote unquote like country, just will not exist anymore. So what usually happens, and there was a different blog post about this, I didn't grab the right one, but this has happened a couple of times in the past when like the Soviet bloc collapsed, and there was there was a TLD for like the Soviet Union. I think it was .su. And there was like confusion about what to do there. I think Russia took it over and it still exists. I'm not sure.
So Russia effectively took it over, but they also didn't manage it. They basically, the best way I'd have to describe it is it's kind of like any of those old company names like Kodak or, well, you get the idea, Polaroid, where they basically just said, if you'll give us money for it, have it. You can register whatever you want. We don't care. And
Yeah.
so that
Okay.
that led to a lot of SUs being really, really sus.
Yeah. So I found the other article I was reading about this. I put in the YouTube chat, and they do talk about like when Yugoslavia broke up, there was like a very long, confusing period about what to do with its top level domain, and that took years to get figured out. So now there's like firm rules where like if the country code stops existing, according to the I think it was the international something or other, yeah,
It's
international standards for
ICANN.
organization, yeah. So if the sort of like international designation for the country goes away because the country goes away, then eventually the TLD for it will also go away. There's like a deprecation set up, and there'll be like, hopefully, usually a couple years warning. Um, but this one is also an issue because there's a lot of companies and individuals using .io domains because they got really popular for computer stuff, because people really liked that it was like input output. Like GitHub uses this for like when you start up a GitHub pages site, it's like your username.github.io. Also, like Glitch uses it, itch.io, the game store uses it. There's a bunch of like this was a really popular one with like startup tech companies. They love these.
And very
But
notably, my Mastodon server is a .io.
yeah, there's some Mastodon servers using it. I saw people bring that up. My personal website is a .io. It's corbin.io. Um, if that goes away, I'm in for a really rough time because I have to move a lot of things and then update even more links, and I have an email address on that domain that I stopped using because I got tired of explaining how to spell it. Um, but I still have like a lot of accounts I didn't update the email on, so those need to be that would yeah. So um, by default, this will be deprecated, but I get the impression that won't happen. That would be my assumption, just because there's so many companies and people um, set up there. So my assumption would be that maybe the ICANN, the organization that manages TLDs, like maybe they hand it off to Google or someone. There's a couple like big tech companies that already effectively run as like a registrar. Like Google made, they have the .google TLD, which is very dumb. But they also have like .zip and I think like .dad. I think they made that one, or .dads. I forget which one. Um,
Google has made a
so
lot.
yeah, so I would guess that .io gets handed off to one of them. That would be my assumption about what happens. I would find it confusing if ICANN is just like, well, oh well. Like there's a lot of infrastructure built up around this, that maybe shouldn't have been, but that's technology.
Um, so my my viewpoint on this is, whatever the rules are, I'm pretty willing to bet that ICANN and IATA is the other big organization that's kind of involved in domain names. Um, I have a feeling that they're going to look at this and ultimately say, you know what, we don't care what the rules are. For the public good, we're just going to make sure that IO goes to someone who's going to maintain it. And that, it could be any number of companies. They might even just spin something off because as this article from Domain Insight points out, let's see, .io had turnover of almost 40 million last year. Fun fact, you can run a company for $40 million if they just retain the same number of IO users. You could just spin off a company to do nothing but maintain this this domain name or this
Yeah.
TLD. It would really be just pure profit company, basically. Well, within reason, obviously, you still have to have a little bit of oversight, but yeah, this can totally work. The other possibility is the new, or not new, but the Chagos Islands could, in theory, keep it. Maybe. I don't know. And if they did, I'm sure they would actually find somebody else to do the actual management of it, and they would effectively just take some of the profit. Either way,
that seems like a great business. Like I think Micronesia likes all that FM money.
exactly. Yeah, either way, like I'm seeing this as kind of a probable non-issue, but it's also something that we do have to keep our eyes on, because you never know if it'll suddenly become an issue. But yeah, it is kind of funny how this stuff happens and how messy it can become. So yeah, and hopefully the .io domains don't suddenly get really expensive, because once countries realize that they can charge a whole lot more, like Micronesia, a lot of times they do. All of a sudden the bills jump up, and no one wants to re-register their domains at, $99 a year when they used to be $10. I don't know. Any other thoughts on that?
I just hope that someone figures it out, because I don't want to move all my stuff.
Yeah.
And also, that's gonna be like a lot of broken links everywhere if that happens.
So
Again, like unless you have a custom domain set up, hopefully not IO. Like all GitHub pages are on .io right now. So that alone is a lot of like small sites and infrastructure.
Well, and Google has been a really frequent user of IO, just for various things, not just their conference related stuff. So yeah, certainly I imagine they're not thrilled with the possibilities here. And as you mentioned, like tons of startups. A lot of those came into existence and then burned up or were bought up, but there are still plenty that have their domains and are still operating on those. So yeah, it wouldn't be great if those just suddenly vanish. But yeah, if this ever actually happens, I'm sure we'll have a lot of comments about it. The good news though is it's going to take several years. There is a whole process for killing off a TLD, and quite frankly, it's probably going to be, at least in this case, no exaggeration, 10 years before anything actually happens. So we're probably okay, hopefully. But talking about something that's okay but also not, let's talk about YouTube for Android TV. Oh my god, this infuriates me. So first, the good news. Well, sort of good news. It appears that Google is probably going to be making a relatively minor change to the YouTube for Android TV app. For those that don't know, this is an unnecessarily long name app for basically YouTube on your Android TV. It is a web wrapper. I think anyone who's used it kind of already knows that. And it is dumb. It's not very efficient. It runs okay, but it's janky. You can tell. But one of the things that they're apparently going to do is when you start up the app, basically every time you start up the app, it's going to ask, who are you? This is the same thing Netflix does, HBO does it. Basically, all of the major streaming apps, Amazon's Prime Video app does it. Yeah, basically all the streaming apps kind of do this or something close to this anyway. The annoying thing is, it will not be making use of the Google TV profile switcher. The Google TV profile switcher is a thing that Google launched. I don't even remember when. It was, I'm going to say 2 years ago. That may be wrong. It may be longer. But basically, it was a thing that you could switch who the active user was, and certain Google apps would know. They would be able to tell which profile you would switch to, and they could provide you different experiences. For whatever reason, this doesn't apply to YouTube for Android TV. It does not apply to a few of Google's other apps, and very crucially, it doesn't apply to any other app. I know this for a fact because I've asked Google directly, hey, is there an SDK or an API of some kind that anybody can use to tell that this happened? And they were very clear, no. I suggested this, and they didn't say that they weren't going to do it. And all of a sudden, they delayed launching this. First, it was delayed for a few months, and then it ended up being delayed for over a year. The rumor was that after receiving a suggestion or two, they decided that they needed to make some changes. I don't know that was ever in reference to what I suggested, but I'm going to take credit for it, because who's going to stop me? Sundar, anytime you want to clear things up, you can come on the podcast and speak.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we're pretty busy, but like if he can, if he can work it into our schedule,
actually
make that happen.
You know what? I'm gonna make some enemies here. Sundar, could you send somebody who would be better?
Ooh.
Yeah. Shade Throne. Send us Dave Burke. I want Dave Burke. Man. Way better. Okay, anyway. So when they finally did get around to launching the profile switcher, it didn't do it. Evidently, they couldn't, either didn't try or failed to achieve what was seemingly a pretty basic feature. And yeah, we're still in this situation where apps cannot respond to profile switching on Android TV / Google TV. So, yeah, that's my take on this. I'm not really, look, I think it's fine that YouTube for Android TV is adopting a profile picker when you sign in. That's fine. The fact that they got the functionality wrong in the first place, not fine. Not fine. You done screwed up. Fix it. You absolute potatoes. Okay, so Corbin, any feelings on this?
I've not used Android TV in a very long time. So
how dare you?
I had Roku stuff, and then I moved out and I used the very bad built-in apps on my Samsung Smart TV. And then I got my Xbox and I moved all the streaming stuff to that, and then I wiped the Smart TV. So I just use the Xbox apps for everything, which is the same web wrapper, but it runs great because it's running on an Xbox Series X. So slightly more horsepower than your average Roku streaming stick.
A little bit. A countdown to Corbin switching to an Apple TV. Um,
I mean, like, if I had another like HDMI port, probably. But like I don't, and the inconvenience of like getting the Xbox controller that turns off after a while, and versus getting like an HDMI switch, which is dumb. I hate those. I'm just gonna use the Xbox. It's okay.
makes sense. All right.
And I have to keep my my Wii on one of the HDMI ports that can't be unplugged. That's critical. I think I have three
Sorry, that
HDMI
that sentence
ports.
just made me laugh a little inside.
I have the Xbox plugged in, I have the Wii, and I have my Switch, and I think that's all my ports. I don't
Okay.
know why it only has three. I need like 10.
No,
I
for
don't
real.
need 10. I would like 10 just to have it. It's like USB ports on a computer. Just as many as you can fit in there, please. Thank you.
I have never had a TV that had enough HDMI ports.
Yeah.
And okay, right now the TV in my living room is not using all of its HDMI ports, but um, it has in the past, and I've definitely pushed it past its limit. And yeah, I hate that. And as it is, the monitor here in my office, I am in excess of its HDMI ports. I would like to use more of them. What I would also like more of is outlets, but I know that's
That's true.
technically an easier thing to fix, but it's also not.
It's easy to fix, but slightly increasing house fire risk
Hmm.
each time.
So, yeah, anyway. Uh all right, on to our bigger topics. So, The Verge has posted about uh the Epic versus Google case and what it effectively starts to mean. So it has been ruled that the Play Store is an illegal monopoly. That that is now the official ruling on the record, and uh, we're starting to get, or not starting to. We have actually gotten the determination from Judge James Donato. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but he's a judge. He can deal with it if I'm saying it wrong. Um, so in this order, uh, they have they have given a couple of key rulings. Um, let's see. I'm making sure I'm not hitting these out of order. So I'm checking. Okay, yeah. So first off, Google will have to distribute third-party app stores within Google Play. Um, and they have to give them the full catalog of Google Play apps unless developers opt out on an app by app basis. So, I'm gonna come back to this because I actually have a lot to say on this. But moving on, hitting some of the others. Um, so okay. So Google will also have to stop requiring Google Play billing for apps distributed on the Play Store, because the jury found that Google had illegally tied its payment system to its App Store. Um, which I think that's fair. You know, it it never made sense to make that a mandatory thing, and it's the same complaint people have had about Apple. Like once you already have an app, go ahead, let them choose how they want to monetize.
Yeah, I think I've probably at times been at least a slight defender of that. Just because like I kind of get the logic of paying for the immense infrastructure and API development of the Play Store and Play services with that fee, but like obviously wasn't handled all that well. Especially when you get to the point where companies are like, we can do basically all of the infrastructure ourselves. Like we can do the payment processing, we can do this and that. And Google's like, no, no, we're gonna do that. So like maybe that would have been fine if it was, you know, significantly lower, but it never was. Google and Apple, I think, both just did kind of a bunch of like hack fixes to try to push back some criticism, be like, well, you know, if you make over like a certain amount, then your percentage drops or whatever. But it probably just needed to be rethought, and now they've the decisions come down. Actually, you can't do that. Because this is what eventually happens, where if you don't want to regulate yourself, someone will do it for you.
Yeah. So Carson brings up a point, and I do very much agree with it. As a user, Google Play billing is great because you can use Play Store credit. And yeah, I couldn't tell you the last time I spent my own money on the Play Store. Google Play credit has been how I paid for everything, including some pretty expensive apps.
Yeah, that was always fun when I was on Android and I'd do the Google Opinion Rewards and then use all those credits for like Pokemon Go items or like other in-app purchase stuff. But I guess the response to that would be like, well, the apps can still take that if they want.
Yeah,
but
and that's certainly a thing. Like you could put it out there as an option. You could charge more for using Google Play. Like if you have another way to monetize that takes less of a chunk, then go ahead. There's nothing wrong with putting up more options.
Yeah, because like a lot of companies have realized that for most of the time, if it's at least not an option, then they lose out on the sale and they want to make money. So a lot of times what has ended up happening is like I don't think they even accept new subscriptions anymore through apps, but like Spotify or Netflix for a while would let you subscribe through the Google Play or Apple or whatever, but they would increase the cost by whatever their fee is. Which, sure, that seems fine to me. Because the alternative is like you taking a cut because someone came from Android, which was the anti-competitive part. Mm-hmm. That seems fine to me. You're paying for like the convenience, I guess.
Yeah.
Kind of the same logic as like PayPal, where like you have all your stuff saved in PayPal, and then when you want to use that, there's a fee associated with it.
So, and I'm gonna throw in that sure, Google, this is requiring that they stop requiring developers include Google Play billing if they're going to, have any sort of billing at all. Strictly speaking, nothing here says that Google can't charge those developers for having their apps on the store. If the issue is that it's unfair that Google is covering some of these expenses, fact of the matter is Google can just say, hey, if you want to have your app on the store, we can charge you per download, or we could charge you a flat rate. We could do like Apple does and charge you once per year. Obviously, different business models can exist, so they don't have to totally rule out other possibilities here. By the way, as anyone paying attention will have noticed, the terms I'm listing here are also things that only are true for 3 years. So from right now, it's November 1st, 2024 through November 1st, 2027. These would all be true things. I'm sure those dates will shift because Google is appealing this. So, Don't take any of those dates as gospel. Okay, anyway, the next thing is they'll have to let developers tell users about other ways to pay from within the Play Store, which I think is pretty closely tied to the previous point, so I doubt we really need to discuss that one. They'll have to let Android developers link to ways to download their apps outside of the Play Store. Carson, I will come back to answer that.
Hold your question until the end of the class.
There's actually a really good explanation for it. Letting developers link to ways to download their apps outside of the Play Store, there are a lot of reasons why this might be desirable. I think it's also worth noting it's possibly risky because this is sort of giving shady developers an opportunity to say, we got you from the Play Store, now we want you to download the shady version of our app and install that instead. And it's not like they couldn't already kind of do this in goofy ways. But yeah, I'm not sure that this one really needs to be a thing. And finally, let Android developers set their own prices for apps irrespective of Play billing, which, as far as I'm aware, wasn't really that big of an issue anyway. I think they already could effectively do this, but there might have been... This might be more related to, like, setting a minimum price that's lower than what Play billing would have allowed, or, things like that. Okay, so to answer Carson's question, why is this temporary? The judge basically came to the decision that these should not be permanent burdens on Google, but rather a market correction effort. Something that would push Google into a position of basically giving some advantage back to would-be competitors so that they can step up and have their own opportunities to be competitive with Google at a disadvantage. And then at the end of that time period, presumably Google would be sufficiently disadvantaged enough that they could return to competing as an actual competitor rather than a giant that no one can beat anyway. Let's be honest, that's BS. Google's going to remain dominant. It's dumb to assume otherwise. But hey, what's a judge know about any of this stuff? Some of the other things that Google is also going to be required to do, or rather not allowed to do, is they can't share app revenue with any person or entity that distributes Android apps or plans to launch an app store or platform. So the reason behind this one, I knew that was going to So
Google Assistant interrupts to say that the US government is overreaching and this is harming innovation.
I would really enjoy that. One of these days I hope we get that. But yeah, this is basically kind of part of the, and it goes with the next one, which reads, offer developers money or perks to launch their apps on the Play Store exclusively or first. It's the fourth one down. Offer device makers or carriers money or perks to pre-install the Play Store. Basically, this is sort of like the Samsung situation. Samsung has its own store, but that they get they get kickbacks from Google to make sure the Play Store is on Samsung phones. Austin, we're gonna come back to that one too, because I have that one falls into some real deep issues. Anyway, they also can't offer developers money or perks not to launch their apps on rival stores, or offer device makers or carriers money or perks not to pre-install rival stores. Um, and I don't know if these are things that are temporary. I'm assuming that this is stuff that's I don't know. I don't know if these rules expire or not. The Verge did not really clearly spell out whether they are, but anyway. So for the most part, a lot of this stuff actually kind of checks out. Excluding the bits in the very beginning that I said I would come back to. Because most of this is sort of the stuff that was seen as anti-competitive. It was seen as Google kind of forcing itself into advantage positions that would benefit Google, that would lock in Google, and ultimately keep others out of the space. So most of this I agree with. I think it's fine. You know, it's unfortunate for Google, but it is what it is. Let's see. Curvy got the about the Elgato device. I don't think I've got the money for it right now. Besides, it'll be cheap again on like Black Friday or so. Okay, so let's see. Austin earlier said Google will almost certainly get an injunction. I can't imagine they won't. Even if it's literally just to carry out an appeal process, they'll get this enjoined 100%. Because it's a pretty big force change, and in a second I'm really gonna dig in, because I think that some of these orders are absolute madhouse stupid. Not the stuff I already agreed with. I think those are fine, but the first things are problematic. Let's see. Austin saying this kills GMS, and in my opinion, the judge was overreaching and may have actually screwed up most of the case by doing so. Austin, I agree. Okay, so where do I find the problem? It is the bit where Google has to serve rival third-party app stores within Google Play. And more importantly, they have to give rival third-party app stores access to the full catalog of Google Play apps unless developers opt out individually. That is insanity. And literally, yeah. I'm pretty sure it's illegal. And even if it's not illegal, this is horrendously dangerous to developers and users. Corbin, I don't want to keep you from talking. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the part I read that, and I don't understand how that would work. Because like I think that the closest version of this I can think of is like on desktop Linux, where you have like a central software install thing that looks like an app store. It's not really an app store. And that connects to a bunch of different repositories that have like app listings in it. Like when you click the install button, it'll grab it from one of the repositories. But that doesn't have any infrastructure for payments. It's all like the same package type. The Google Play Store, it has, like, how does this work for paid apps? Would like Google be handling the payments for its apps through third-party stores? That doesn't really make sense. Also, like, if it, like, let's say the Google Play apps have to be in the Epic Game Store on Android for example. Like, does Epic take your credit card and then they pay Google, or they try to directly pay the developer? Also, the thing with the Google Play Store is something like this probably would have been easier 10 years ago when every Android app was like a single APK package. But they're not anymore. Because those APKs were getting they were just massive file sizes where you download icons and images and other files for phones, like not your phone, that you would never use, but you have to download it anyway.
Yeah,
So now
split
everything's an
APK
app.
functionality is
Yeah. So now everything's
messy.
split APK app bundles where you're just like downloading pieces of the app that you need. So that would all need to be infrastructure that another app store would have to develop, or Google makes a system where it'll do that packaging and then send it to the third party store for download. I don't really know. So I don't really know how that works. Um, Something like that, I could see something like that maybe working for like a game console, maybe. But like in the context of like smartphone apps, it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so I made a bunch of notes, and unintentionally you kind of poked several holes into it, but
I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. So but I'm going to call out a few specific things. So paid apps in particular, I think, are one of the biggest problem areas, and for so many reasons. One of the biggest ones is let's just use Epic as the example. I think we could certainly use a few others, which would be scarier examples, but let's use Epic as a starting point. Let's say there is a paid app. Who is collecting the payment, and more importantly, how is that payment reaching the developer? Who's paying the developer? Does the payment, as you suggested, then have to go through Google before it can reach the developer? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Or does Google then become required to hand over the developer's payment information, contact information, all relevant disclosures, and signed contracts to a third party? That's illegal. I mean, outright, it's illegal. These are private contracts. There's private data there. Some of this stuff could be effectively doxing developers. It is madhouse impossible that would be the strategy for something like this. But also, funneling everything through Google seems like it's in direct contradiction to whatever this order is trying to achieve. So neither of these works on that point alone. That is, I mean, you literally cannot do that because you're effectively forcing developers to not be present for signing new contracts with new carriers. And by carrier, I don't mean cell carrier. I mean a store as a carrier. That, you can't do that. It is illegal. So then let's talk a little bit about an implementation detail. What about in-app purchases? Or subscriptions for that matter. These are things that have pretty complicated APIs built up, and the API endpoints that actually enforce a lot of this stuff involves callbacks to servers that are not Google servers, they're the developer servers. So any company would then have to implement the same stuff. Here's the messy thing about that. All of these things are also private. So what if somebody wanted to, I don't know, build an app store that basically, or intentionally or otherwise, they built an app store that made it really easy for someone to hack in-app purchases. All of a sudden, developers are not getting paid as tons and tons of IAPs just magically get activated. this is not a hard thing to do if you have those endpoints available. And that's something that Google manages. And Google has done a very good job managing it. And they do this in large part because they also have a lot of encryption keys that secure this. That's something that would then have to be shared in theory with a third party in order to get those apps working. This, again, the security holes are insane. So either they're basically handing over the keys to the castle, or developers would have to then build out whole new systems for each store, which, I mean, that's something they could certainly want to do, but it's hard to imagine how they'd be forced to do it. Let's see. So anti-piracy measures, kind of already hit that. Yes. And kind of in cap on the paid aspect, but what happens when one of these stores shuts down? I mean, sure, that looks bad on that store that shut down. Let's say Epic decides, you know what, Android apps suck, we're just not going to bother running our own store anymore. Okay, that looks bad for Epic, but it also looks terrible for Android. So the OS that is basically the one lone competitor to iOS, it's just now going to be saddled with an inherent not just possibility, but a certainty that eventually these stores that exist for it will be shutting down, and money that people spent on those stores will just be lost, because Google's not going to keep hosting things that you didn't pay Google to host. Of course, I activated like everything in the room with that one. So I mean, just on the subject of paid apps alone and in-app purchases and subscriptions, all these things are incredibly complicated. And this is demonstrably a terrible idea. And look, it's not like I don't think that there should probably be some corrective measures, but this one is not okay.
Yeah, like, well, the counterpoint to it would be very complicated to add like interoperability to the Play Store, and what happens to your purchases that have like the Play Store like sort of connected to them but not. The fix for that would be make the Play Store not Google, which is the next thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Really quickly though, I did want to hit a couple of the other points that aren't tied specifically to paid apps. One of which is free and open source apps. A lot of these do have licensing issues, and it's, in some cases, international legalities. Google has good geofencing built into its system. So if you say an app isn't available to a particular country, it won't be available to that country. Is this something that can be reliably enforced across other stores? Not necessarily. And I know that's very much a what if or whataboutism, but it is one of the questions that has to be considered. And if international distribution is an issue, then it can certainly get messy. Also, what happens if a developer decides to pull an app down? Does it reliably get pulled down from other platforms? Can that be implemented? Will a developer even know that their app is suddenly on another platform? Is that something that they'll be informed of or have access to? So many of these things get really messy, and even just coming down to like implementation details of what happens if one store doesn't agree to carry, or one store wants to implement a policy a certain way and it's in conflict with something, and a developer never knows about this, you never know how all these things are going to play out, and it could become very bad for a developer's business if they don't know what's going on. And frankly, there's no certainty that they're ever going to be properly informed. So let's see. But the reality is, I think the reason that this stipulation exists is because Epic wants basically a free ride. Epic wants to be able to show up on day one with a giant library of apps, which obviously some developers will be perfectly happy to be on the Epic Store, but I think a lot of developers have either abandoned their apps or they're just kind of dormant. They don't really check them on a regular basis. And I think Epic is just trying to take advantage of that. They know that if they launch an app store, they're going to get several hundred, probably a few thousand apps on day one. And for the first year, it's probably not going to go too much higher over the coming months. So they're trying to get that automatic, hey, we have 100,000 apps on our store because we launched it right away and we're great. So I'm sure that's why this is happening.
Yeah, I don't get how that would work. That's the one thing that's like just totally baffling to me. The other stuff can make sense. I think that, especially with the Play Store billing, like it's actually more work to force apps to use Play Store billing. So that one should be very easy. That's just what like the Microsoft Store does, because no one wants to use the Microsoft Store, so they're not going to make that. They don't have that rule.
So let's see. There were a few other minor details to this ruling, but nothing really stood out as particularly consequential. Let's see. Just double checking that I didn't forget something. But yeah, and obviously one of the talking points, which we're going to come back to shortly, is that some people would love to see the Play Store spun off into its own company, which out of all of the things inside of Google that could be spun off into their own companies, that's actually one of the few that's almost kind of believable. Like it.
Sorry, I zoned out for 1 second. What's spinning out?
Oh no, it would not be completely insane if the Play Store was spun out into its own company.
Yeah, that definitely could exist, and we'll get into the other Android related stuff. But like that's assuming it stays roughly the same licensing model. Yeah, I mean, even if they lose some money from the play billing being optional, like there'd still be a lot of developers using that because that would be the easiest option in a lot of cases, or there's user demand for it, as whoever was Carson said they want to use that. Yeah, so that should be a fine business, especially if like Samsung over the years has like tried to maintain its own app store just as like a little bit of a check against Google owning everything. Like in theory, there would be less of a reason for them to do that, and they could just like become a partial owner in the Google Play Store company, like that kind of dynamic. The same thing, how Hulu used to work, where it was just partially owned by all of the big movie studios that put their stuff on there, and then they all profit from it, So, but yeah.
Yeah, though that didn't work out so well in the end. So yeah, this is ultimately, I think some of these ideas or some of these orders actually are fine. You know, eh, the judge did not necessarily overreach, and he did push back on some, or he refused some of Epic's requests, which included stuff like making sideloading a one-tap action. Um, he he pushed back against or oh, Epic wanted, instead of a 3-year period on these things, Epic wanted it to be 6 years, which the judge basically said, no, that's too long. Um, and I know there was one or two other things, but I don't remember what they were. So yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. I think that I honestly I think what's likely to happen, and going exactly with what Austin said, the judge overreached, and in all likelihood, I think when this reaches appeals, which Google is obviously appealing this, um, you know, I have a feeling that a lot of the meat of this is going to end up falling apart. So will any of this ever actually happen? I doubt it. I think we're probably going to see the Play Store um, uh, live in limbo for a little bit while they take this to the appeals court. And somewhere along the way, Google will successfully get that part stricken. And after that, I'm sure Google will keep fighting all the other stuff, but they really need to, I'm sure for Google's interest, they really need to stop anything involving the third-party Play Store or third-party app stores from having direct catalog access and from being forced to be distributed through the Play Store. That being said, one thing that I have suggested for years that they just need to do, and I don't know how and why they haven't already done it, is a Humble Bundle app store distributed through the Play Store. It just kind of seems like it should be there. But whatever. Anyway, did you have any other thoughts on this one, or shall we move on?
No, except the Humble Bundle thing reminds me that like one thing they could have done is the Google Play Store already has like a license key system. So, you know, the Epic Game Store could just like, I don't know, sell the keys. That would still be a lot of work, but like,
Yeah,
that would be a little bit easier than like making the Epic Store like a download manager / payment processor for everything in the Play Store.
yeah, and there are complications when you start getting into like in-app purchase solutions and things like that. But,
Yeah.
yeah, there are ways that they could do this better, smarter, easier, and they haven't. So I'm going to give my voice a break for a moment. Corbin, tell us about the DOJ.
Oh boy, is it my turn?
Yes.
Okay. Let me turn this off. This has been annoying me. So I saw this last night and I laughed. It was very funny. So yesterday, I guess it was, yeah, the CNBC. I don't know when the DOJ like filed this, but they did a court filing about some possible recommendations for Google's antitrust case. So I forget when it was. Was it like last month? I want to say when the U.S. Department of Justice has had an ongoing investigation into Google search and how it might be anti-competitive, and they won their case. Don't know when it was.
Okay, I don't know when they won their case, but The filing that has the recommendations was actually just filed yesterday.
Yeah. Okay.
Though
So
Google, I believe, had early access to it because,
yeah.
man, they responded quick.
Yeah. So yeah. So the DOJ published their recommendations, and it's very short. I did read it. I've forgotten some of it. But they basically lay out kind of what the whole lawsuit was about. It's not a surprise. We're like, the issue here is Google having the most popular search engine and the main online advertising platform and the most popular mobile operating system and the most popular web browser, and like them having all of those things lets them do like crazy vertical integration anti-competitive stuff together as a unit, and so something there needs to be split off. And they didn't like say in the listing specifically that like maybe Google shouldn't have Android or Chrome anymore, but that was Google's takeaway from the filing. So maybe other information, or they're just jumping to conclusions.
Well,
Not crazy jumping to conclusions, because like that is one of the possible options here for the DOJ.
um, it, if you do read through at least the interpretations of The Verge, and I think the CNBC article too, um, and it might have even been in Google's response, uh, they were very clear that the DOJ is still thinking about more. They're already asking for a few things in their filing, and they're basically saying this is a starting point, and we're going to ask for more in the future, which is kind of a big hit, and everyone's pretty clear that part of what they're asking for is some breakups.
Yeah, something gets broken up. Not like super clear what yet, because there's not like an official order or something approximating that. They're just saying like these are what we recommend to the judge deciding this.
Well, their recommendations are even just vaguely worded in a way that they don't mention any breakup or how they would break it up. They're literally just kind of tossing out there a phrase. I forget what the phrase was, but effectively, it's sort of, it's almost like in mob movies where someone's like, "Oh, take care of that person." Take care of does not imply anything other than like putting out a hit on somebody.
Yeah, well, they specifically say the remedies necessary to, quote, prevent and restrain monopoly maintenance could include contract requirements and prohibitions, non-discrimination product requirements, data interoperability requirements, and structural requirements. Mm-hmm. And that last one is you need to split off or sell things or whatever.
The last one is the putting a hit out on somebody.
Yeah. So Google put out a blog post late last night, and I saw this and I laughed. Because my job as news editor of howtogeek.com involves reading a lot of press releases, and they're all very bland and boring, and they're use a lot of buzzwords that I get annoying to read. And this one is aggressive. They're very mad. This is the drill tweet of like, "I'm not mad. Please don't put in the newspapers that I'm mad." This is an angry tweet blog post. So like Google says, the DOJ today shared a broad outline of radical changes it may demand as part of its lawsuit over how we distribute search. Blah blah blah. We are concerned the DOJ is already signaling requests that go far beyond the specific legal issues in this case. This case is about a set of search distribution contracts. Maybe. Rather than focus on that, the government seems to be pursuing a sweeping agenda, that will impact numerous industries and products. Yeah. with significant unintended consequences for consumers, businesses, and American competitiveness. And my favorite bit is in that quote, they link to a Washington Post editorial titled "A Judge Just Ruled Against Google, but there's a big hitch." And I'm sure, and it's like, I can't read it because it's paywalled, but it's written by the editorial board. That's the byline, which is what the Washington Post does when they're like gonna write something that's not popular and they don't want to like get flack for it. Like whoever wrote that opinion is not putting their name there. So just coward shit. I'll put my name on my bad opinions. Anyway, so they go on and they basically say like, here's all the bad stuff that'll happen if you do anything to us. If you wrong us, this is what will happen. And they say that the first one is it will force Google to share your search queries, clicks, and results with competitors that risk your privacy and security. So basically they're saying like if you pick a different search engine or if like they have to share data, then like the other companies would have your data. Which like I guess, but like that goes back to the thing where like the US just really needs like baseline data privacy laws. So there's an easy fix for that. We won't do it because it won't pass, but you know. And then my favorite one, the second bullet, hampering Google's AI tools risks holding back American innovation at a critical moment. And this is the thing that like Meta and a bunch of other companies just complained to the EU because the EU passed some AI laws that says you can't train your AI models on European data. And Meta was like, but we want to do that though. You're stifling innovation by not letting us steal everything. And that's exactly what Google's putting here. They're putting there's enormous risks to the government putting its thumb on the scale of this vital industry. All precisely at the moment that we need to encourage investment, new business models, and American technological leadership. Like this is just the classic neoliberalism, conservatism, free market stuff where it's like, don't you dare regulate. Every bit of regulation stifles innovation. If we had no regulation, we'd have maximum, innovation. It's very, very silly. That part was very funny to me.
I appreciate how you made fun of this. I think it was in your article. Basically pointing out that, it wasn't that long ago that it was telling people to eat rocks and put glue in their food. So, we are, maybe the innovation needed a little bit more restraint anyway, and taking a little more time wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, like they say, it's hard to think of a technology more important for America's technological and economic leadership. I can think of a couple things. I can think of a couple things. Again, this goes back to the whole thing where sort of like every company wants you to believe that AI is more important than it is because like this is the thing they've all decided to spend a lot of money on, and they need to show return or product for that. So it's very silly. And then they go on to say splitting off Chrome or Android would break them and many other things. And they basically say that like Android is secure and it's a free open source and Chrome is open source and no one else. They say few companies would have the ability or incentive to keep Android and Chrome open source or invest in them at the same level we do. Make no mistake, breaking them off would change their business models, raise the cost of devices, and undermine Android and Google Play in their robust competition with Apple's iPhone and App Store. So first of all, the robust competition with Apple's iPhone was also very funny because if you're looking at global usage, iPhone is like a tiny part of the pie. Android has like 75% global market share. iPhone's around like 25, something like that. So like there's not really robust competition at the global level. There is in the US. Android is in the minority in the US because all the kids have iPhones. Which is something that the DOJ is also looking into about iMessage.
Yeah, well, the DOJ is not nearly motivated enough to deal with that one, but
Yeah.
and this is a bit of a complicated subject because the DOJ is, they obviously have to take global into account, but they rule over the U.S.
Right.
And
Right.
so,
They're primarily concerned about U.S. consumers or whatever U.S.
right.
residents.
So this is one of those situations where, just to illustrate the point, if some company had, let's just make this more ridiculous. Let's say that they only had 5% market share in the U.S., but 95% market share across the rest of the world. Should the DOJ be getting involved in that? Harder to say, because that's pretty dominating in the rest of the world. But, well, the DOJ,
And
it's not their job to police the rest of the world. It's their job to police the U.S. So
right, and the EU has already put its own legislation in place for Google, and other countries could do the same if they wanted to.
Also, the EU oversteps as practice. Like, by default, they overstep on a regular basis, just with the whole thing of every punishment takes into account the company's global, worldwide revenue rather than looking at their whatever they actually made within the country, which to this day I still think is something that the EU should be directly punished for. But
I mean, I'm as someone who lives in a country with very little consumer protections, I'm mostly glad the EU is as strict as it is, because it means my iPhone has a Type-C port.
I agree with their strictness. I agree with them being pushy. I just don't agree with how they do their math.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I think their math is illegal, but I'm okay with most of the rest of what they're trying to do, except GDPR. I think that needed to be fixed, but
yeah, that was a implementation again, sometimes leaves a little bit to desire.
Yes.
But I'd prefer that over
sucks.
Yeah, versus the US, which has no ideas and no implementation.
Yeah, not even trying.
Yeah, because we don't want to stifle innovation. That'd be bad. Because if there's one thing I need in my life, it's innovation. And basically their argument is like Chrome and Android like benefit each other, benefits Google, benefits users. There's a lot of like shared infrastructure across both things, which is true. And so if that was split off, something could happen there. And this is the splitting off Android and Chrome is the one thing that everyone focused on. I think is the most interesting part. Before I go into a rant, did you want to go?
All right. Well, is your rant specifically about the splitting off Android and Chrome, or are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at the risk of stepping on your toes, which I don't think I'm about to do, but possibly. The fact of the matter is, I do see some very real implications, because they're not wrong when they say that splitting them off would have impacts. However, where I think they're wrong is they're making it sound like this is necessarily, one, a bad thing at all, and two, that it would be outrageously expensive, or three, that any one of these, or either one of these two things would become basically abandonware. Fact of the matter is, I don't think any of those are necessarily true for various reasons. And to be fair, I also think some of them could be worse than what Google's even suggesting. Um, so if we're talking about Android in particular, what happens if it gets spun off into a separate company? Well, they probably have to charge a license fee for copies of Android. Whoopity-doo. How much is it going to be? Think about the math on how many Android devices are sold, and think about the math on how many developers you'd have to hire and how much it would cost to keep developing Android. Fact is,
And there's already there's already fees associated with licensing Android. Like I don't know if it's a
yeah,
strict
they're
like you
patent
pay
fees.
Google, but like there's you're licensing the Android name. I don't there's a split cost with that, but like you're definitely like paying people to do this process with Google of like getting a new Android device set up and with the Play Store and everything.
If Play Store is included, then yes, there's even more involved. Though it's unclear who's paying who.
Right.
But
Right.
um,
If you're a random company just like downloading AOSP, you're probably not paying anything.
well, you're either paying nothing or you're paying just for patent fees.
Yeah.
Um, if and the more that you are doing, the more complicated it gets. And again, sometimes it becomes a question of who's paying who. Google might actually be paying you to use Android in some instances. So uh,
Yeah.
it is clear. Wait, now mine's too low. Okay.
You sound the same volume to me, so I don't know if it's an OBS issue.
I don't see how it would be.
Hmm.
Um, I'm wondering if maybe I'm even just talking quieter now because my throat's starting to get worn out. And
Well,
oh,
good.
really quick, I'm gonna bring up the same thing I brought up before about Chrome. Or well, I brought it up among you and a couple of other people. The caveat with Chrome, as I see it, is right now, Chrome is being developed by one company that has plenty of power involved. And what would happen if Chrome gets split off? It could become its own company. Honestly, I don't see that happening because where's the money coming from? No one's gonna fund that. The other possibility is Chrome could become kind of more like a group effort. Let's say Microsoft and, well, maybe not Apple, but Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and a couple of other companies become the de facto developers, and they're all going to contribute something into this. Because that seems to be universally the vision people have for what would happen if Chrome actually were split out. And to me, that's scarier than letting Google keep it. Because I look at a bunch of companies that are already gatekeeping the internet. That is what they do. And once you put them all in a room together and give them the option to gatekeep the internet, and you take away the fact that it's hard to call a group of companies a monopoly, they're just going to obliterate Firefox. They're going to obliterate anything else that would be a competitor, and they will just gatekeep Chrome into eternity. So I actually do think I find that scarier, and any attempt to break off Chrome needs to happen with the biggest safeguards to prevent exactly that kind of thing from happening. Okay, now go for
Okay,
you.
great. Now I can go. So I'll agree mostly with Android. Like I think an Android company that'd be fine. Like they get money from licensing. I think it would depend a lot on does the Google Play Store or at least the App Store part of Google Play go to the Android company, or is that it separate? I don't know.
I don't think it has
But
to.
like, yeah,
That's certainly a good source of income, but I think it retains that same danger that it would create an unfair business practice.
Right. Yeah, like it doesn't have to. I think just device licensing alone would do, or like maybe honestly there wouldn't have to be a license, and it's just like it becomes like the Linux Foundation model where you just have like Samsung pays for some engineers to work at the Android company, and Google pays for some engineers, and so on. Um, maybe that could work. I don't see why, because like all the big Android OEMs have like a lot invested in Android, so it wouldn't be that much of an ask for them to just like, you want to ship over some engineers to work on it, or you own a percentage of the company, or it's just Linux model where like you can like vote on it or whatever. There's a lot of ways that could work. I think that'd be very easy. Chrome, I don't know what to do there. I think a lot of people like comparing the current state of Chrome to Internet Explorer's monopoly in like the early 2000s because the market share was similar. Internet Explorer was actually worse. I think they were around like 90%.
Yeah.
Usage, and Chrome is around like 70 because Safari is a check on their power, which is funny because that's anti-competitive because Apple won't let another web browser on iPhone and iPad, and if they did that, Chrome would have more market share. So that's a thing that DOJ should probably be thinking about. But the thing with Internet Explorer and why it failed is like, yeah, it got some regulatory pushback, not a lot because the US fucked up its case against Microsoft. But really what did Internet Explorer in is that it sucked. Like it was a bad user experience. Developers hated it because like it didn't follow any standards. It just did its own thing all the time. Well, Microsoft
fair,
was
the one thing I'm going to hand to Internet Explorer is that if a bunch of standards are written by the guys who make up 5 to 10% of the market, and they don't consult you about them, it's kind of fair for you to say, yeah, we weren't there to agree to it. What are we going to do?
The web development back then is very much like making a browser extension now, where Mozilla and like Opera and everyone else have like a web extension standard. But like Google doesn't like talk to them. Like they're at a different party. So that's really fun for me when I'm trying to make a browser extension that works on Chrome and Firefox. Anyway, it's like IE sucked and Microsoft was incredibly complacent. Like Internet Explorer 6, I think stuck around for 5 or 6 years with like no changes, which is a long time in tech world.
Yeah.
And then they just got to Internet Explorer 7, which was like marginally better, and then IE, which was marginally better. And it wasn't until IE started dropping off significantly that it started getting actually pretty good, and then it didn't matter. So the difference with Chrome is that Chrome is actually pretty good. It's still pretty, like, I disagree with a lot of like the recent features that Google's tried to put in, like a lot of the shopping stuff. I've complained about the like they're working on buy now pay later integration, like that's gross. But like for the most part, Chrome is still a very good user experience, and they're keeping web devs happy with rolling out like new APIs constantly. And sort of to Google's point that like this all goes around, like Google made Chrome because they run web services. Like their business was built on web apps and search and everything, and the web development space, at least for their perspective, I think I would agree with this to an extent, was lagging. So they wanted to like speed that up and make their own web platform, and that would benefit their services, and also other websites and web apps could use that. So like yeah, like Chrome is still a good user experience. It's getting new APIs constantly. Like web apps are very good because a lot of the stuff Chrome has done. Um, and so that's the difference. Is like Internet Explorer fumbled because Microsoft got very complacent and IE was bad. Google is very engaged and Chrome is very actively developed, and it's still a pretty good product. So it won't it won't collapse in the same way where people started jumping to Firefox from IE because IE was bad, and then Chrome came along, and it was a lot faster than Firefox in a lot of cases. So people jumped to that. Um, that doesn't really exist anymore. So I don't know what you do there. I know there's a lot of, I can imagine a lot of like small scale interventions that would make a difference. Like, you know, when you visit google.com and another web browser, it's like, hey, do you want to download Chrome? Like off in the corner or something, like maybe make that illegal. Microsoft does the same thing with Edge, except they're very more desperate about it. Uh, like if you try, like they've even done the things where like if you try to go to Google, if you try to go to the Chrome download page or search Chrome or something in Edge, there's like a in browser thing that's like, please stop, please, this is you're already using the best web browser. Um, so like you could ban Google from doing that. You could ban Google from like making deals to pre-install Chrome on PCs, which is the thing they do. You could do a lot of interventions, but like I don't think that would make a big difference because people just like Chrome is like the default, and like unless you make it a lot worse or there's something a lot better, that's not going to change.
Right.
So I don't know what the answer is there, except you know in terms of large scale interventions. Like if Chrome was its own company, then I guess it could sort of follow that same like Linux Foundation Android model where just like a bunch of tech companies, you know, work on it, but like that wouldn't benefit any of them because like unless like the Android company also exists. And the Android company would need a like first party web browser probably, or like a stock web browser or something. So they would have an incentive to work on it. But like I don't know what the incentive would be for like yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how that would work. Um, I feel like maybe yeah, I don't know.
And Carson brings up a funny point. Imagine banning
Yeah.
Chrome or taking Chrome away from the company that is largely building Chromebooks. I mean, there's ways that can work. It's just funny.
Yeah, that's the part where if I was the DOJ, that's like one of the bigger red flags that doesn't get talked about as much. Like if you think about it, it's just really weird that like most of the or not maybe not most, but like a lot of laptops in like the US education system are just like forever tied to Chrome. And then once Google decides to stop updating Chrome on that laptop, it's just a brick. Uh and Chromebooks also have a pretty decent market share in the consumer market as well. And that's always my go-to whenever someone wants to be like, "Oh, Chromebooks are real computers now." I'll be like, "Can I change the browser?" "Oh, I can't." "Okay, all right." And it's not even you can't change the browser in the same way of iPhone, where like you can change the browser, but it's like the same underlying tech. Like I can't replace Chrome on a Chromebook with Firefox. Like it doesn't work like that.
Right. I'm not sure that really. I mean, obviously that part is anti-competitive, but like the mere fact that Chromebooks have basically like a built-in end of life period. I'm not sure that part is
Yeah,
factoring in.
that's a different issue. Yeah, that's more like goes into the same like general industry thing the US needs to have, where it's like you need to do your best to not make things break
Yeah.
when you're done maintain like I like there's not really a good justification for why Chromebooks don't have like a unlock mechanism. They used to. You used to, a lot of earlier Chromebooks just had like normal PC BIOS and you could install Linux or something. But they don't really have that anymore.
Yeah.
So, same thing with iPhones and iPads. Like there just needs to be like a mechanism where, at least when they're done updating it, they'll unlock it and it's like, all right, here you go. You can do whatever you want with it. We're done.
That and that would certainly incentivize a few companies to keep things going a lot longer, just for the purpose to avoid unlocking.
Yeah. So I don't really know what the fix there with Chrome is. I almost feel like a lot of those smaller scale interventions along with splitting off other parts of Google might be okay, and then like maybe you move Chromium to like Linux Foundation structure or something. I don't know. That one I think is harder because the browser really can't exist as a business because people don't pay for browsers. And Chromium is open source. So Diablo says, can we see Google just abandon Android Chrome OS to make a new OS? Yeah, that'd be funny if they have to split it off and then immediately like, all right, we're done with this. We're going to make a new thing that is all proprietary and only our thing. That would be funny. But yeah, the Chrome stuff I have thought about a lot. I don't really know what the solution there is, because like I do want Chromium to be like a mostly independent project because it is critical infrastructure for the tech industry. Chromium is just because like it's what most web browsers are based on now. It's like it powers a lot of desktop apps that are using like Electron,
Node.js.
It's on a lot of like server software, including the server software I was writing just an hour ago. So like Chromium is like really important technical infrastructure at this point. So I would like that part to be independent, but also if that's independent, that doesn't solve the issue of Chrome, the finished product, having 70% market share. That's a different issue that would have to be fixed.
Yeah. And Diablo, that you raise an interesting point of, could Google just abandon, of course I woke up another device. Could they just abandon Android and Chrome OS? And I would even maybe, well, no, I guess not Chromium, but what if they just made a new OS to take their places? And I mean, for the legal purposes, that would be a weird situation, because they'd almost kind of be proving that they could exist, or they can do without those business segments. They don't need to be the owners of Android and Chrome OS if they're killing those products and trying to replace them with another OS. So, I mean, will they do that? No, but
I think that'd be very funny. That would be the funniest option. Google has to split off Android and then immediately is like, we will never use Android again.
I mean, strictly speaking, that's what Huawei did.
I think whatever happens here, Google might not make Pixel phones anymore. I think they'd be like, actually, I think we're done with this now.
It's kind of funny. Obviously, internet commenters being what they are, you're never going to get anything particularly useful out of a lot of them. But I did get a lot of laughs reading comments on the Verge article about this. Particularly the ones that related to Internet Explorer and I don't know. You'd have to read some of them because they're really funny. People who just do not really understand how things work.
Yeah, I mean that's the same thing with like any public discussion about like the gaming industry, where like you just like no one knows how any of this works, so you can't actually talk about it. Um, like I there's been news articles about like Ubisoft might get bought out or something, and so that whenever the discussion goes like, well, why are they like not doing well, and then like everyone is like, oh, they're too woke. Like, no, that's not what we're doing here. That's not the issue. Um, so yeah, Chrome and Android splitting off. I could see Android splitting off. Maybe the Play Store splits off with it or its own thing, whatever, something. Um, I don't really know how that works with Chrome, but there's probably things they could do there. Um, they also go on to say changes to the online advertising market would make online ads less valuable for publishers and merchants and less useful for consumers. And yeah, I have a lot of feelings about the online advertising industry that like I've tried to make coherent uh for a while, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to do it. It's just like a whole house of cards. Like I really feel like for a while online advertising has been like a .com bubble level of like this doesn't make sense, it's gonna explode at some point. uh like it really doesn't make sense. Like everyone in this situation is like inflating or deflating the value of ads and click-through rates and whatnot. So that's a whole thing like I feel like would explode whether or not Google is forced to divest it. That's just generally been unstable for a long time. And they also say the also last thing in here that I thought was funny was their last bullet point in this very mad blog post is unreasonable restrictions on how Google promotes our search engine would create friction for consumers and harm businesses. So this is the thing they were talking about where the DOJ is mad at Google because Google pays a lot of money to be the default search engine on Apple devices and every web browser and a bunch of other things. And that part would also be pretty easy to fix. And then they throw in, so basically like they want to be able to keep making those deals. And they say restrictions would reduce revenue for companies like Mozilla, reducing its ability to invest in its own browser, and Android smartphone makers, potentially raising phone prices. So just like a little bit at the end of this blog post, Google's like, you guys are going to kill Mozilla. You're going to make us kill Mozilla. Mm-hmm. Which is very funny. That's been a whole like side thing in this like legal case is like, if Google can't do like search engine deals anymore, like how does Mozilla continue to exist? There are ways around that. It's not really clear what those would be. Like again, if the US had like a browser choice option, then Mozilla would just get free users from that for a while. Maybe that could sustain them. It wouldn't be Google search money, but then you can also do other things there. Maybe the government just like subsidizes everyone who is not Google who wants to make a web browser. Like there's a lot of options here that could happen, but Google is just like, if you stop us, we'll kill Mozilla.
To be fair, we've seen how Mozilla spends money.
Yeah.
So maybe, I don't know that they can be trusted with money because they're bad at it. They're really bad at it.
Mozilla again. I want to appreciate what they do, but they make a lot of dumb choices all the time. Like their thing now they're getting into is they want to be like a venture capital fund and like research hub for AI. It's like, guys, don't do that. That's not what anyone wants you to do. We just want Firefox to be good, and you can work on Thunderbird too. People like Thunderbird. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this blog post was extremely funny. I read this at like midnight last night when I saw it. I got a good chuckle out of it. Um, when companies are this mad at regulators, it tells me the regulators are probably on the right track. Uh, so yeah, fun stuff. Again, don't really know what would happen here or what even the final options would be. And even after something is decided, there's going to be years of like litigation and appeals to the decision. So it's going to be a while before anything actually happens. But um, I definitely do not envy the DOJ or the judge in this, because you're looking at a lot of interconnected parts. And if you take one out, it would be hard to predict what happens to all the others. And I'm not saying that in a way like leave it alone, because leaving alone is worse. I think that's worse. Like all this like got way. This should have all been changed like a decade ago. It just has grown into this monster that needs to be killed now. But it I there's just a lot happening here, and any single decision would affect a lot of seemingly unrelated things. Like even they talk about, advertising, like, oh whoops, like every publisher and a lot of websites are just like fully reliant on Google ad money to continue surviving, partially because Google put them in that position. But like that's what's happening here. So I don't envy anyone trying to figure it out from here on out. That seems not fun.
So,
At least in terms of like being effective. Obviously, they could make like very small scale decisions that don't do anything, and that would be easy, and it wouldn't do anything.
well, I would not totally discount the. I don't want to call them small scale, but I would. I would argue that the nuclear option of breaking them up is not necessary to solve this. I think that there are ways to get there that don't necessarily go to the instant and immediate blow it up strategy. That being said,
And the U.S. has proven on multiple occasions
they're not
that
good at that.
they're not good at that, and we're sometimes, very rarely, we split up the big companies. We don't have a good track record with making sure they stay that way.
Yeah.
Like almost all of AT&T combined back together. Almost all the companies that got broken up from Standard Oil are now like three companies. We're not very good at this in general.
Um, yeah, we are terrible at it. That being said, I do think Google needs to be afraid in this situation. And look, the practical, let's be honest, of it situation is this is going to take years and years to play out in court, just like the last thing. So I'm not so convinced that we're gonna see this ever happen, and Google only has to win one appeal in order to prevent a breakup.
Yeah, like we could easily get to the point where like, oh, nothing happens, which is what happened to Microsoft,
Yeah.
where the DOJ fumbled the ball at the last moment, and Microsoft basically didn't have to do anything, because this was the same thing. Like there was talk about like Microsoft having to split off IE or other parts of itself, and then nope, didn't have to do that.
Well, and okay. I mean, it wasn't even really last moment. It was just that ended up becoming the last moment when that's when the DOJ screwed up. Because even if they didn't screw up then, Microsoft had more opportunities, more ways that they could appeal it, more ways they could fight it, and that's part of what makes our system both good and bad. is not everything has to be decided correctly, but at the same time, the system really just caters to the fact that if you have enough money, you get to relitigate something 100 times before it ever becomes reality. So the reason I think Google should be scared, though, is it's not just the DOJ. The practical, honest reality of it is there are a lot of people that would like to see Google be broken up. And obviously, we could point to the ridiculous side, Republicans. And look, you can have whatever political beliefs you like, but right now it is very popular among Republicans. They'd love to see most of the tech companies get broken up, shrunk down to insignificant little little players in the industry, and obviously they'd love to leave other companies fully intact. But it is popular on the right to talk about breaking up Google. Likewise, and this is where I think this is what Google should be afraid of. There's also voices on the left that are pushing to see companies like Google broken up. I mean, this has been one of the biggest talking points of Elizabeth Warren. And people have heard my opinion about her, or rather her policies. Let's just say Backguano plays heavily into what I'm pretty sure is affecting her mindset. But at the end of the day, there are people who are fans of the idea of breaking up Google into tiny little pieces the size of mom and pop shops, which is pretty much what she's actually endorsing. So yeah, the thing is, though, the combination of two otherwise diametrically opposed groups coming together and agreeing on this one thing, it gives momentum to the possibility that it actually could happen. Because they are influencing the judge's opinion. They are influencing the opinions of a jury if this finds its way in front of juries. They are going to certainly be putting pressure on the DOJ to pursue this to whatever logical end they can get to. So I think genuinely, unlike the Play Store situation that we were talking about earlier, I think this is one Google actually has to worry about, because it really could go very, very badly for them, and they might not have the ability to just appeal their way through everything, especially if, let's say, Congress decides to start voting on it as opposed to leaving it up to the courts, which, just a reminder, they can do. This is the thing that sometimes Congress will just step in and legislate it, as opposed to leaving it up to judicial decisions.
It's true. Sometimes Congress will pass laws. It's been known to happen on occasion.
Fortunately,
increasingly rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes it does happen.
Yeah. Sometimes a bunch of spoiled rich kids get together and decide to ruin things in ways that the courts can't even hope to achieve.
Curly said Clinton was extremely pro-corporate. At least Biden is trying to do some antitrust. The Microsoft lawsuit fell apart a little bit after George W. Bush became president. But yeah, like most of it would have been under Clinton. Honestly, like with this, I know like the DOJ is like a federal organization and there is like, some level of chain of command there. But like the Microsoft lawsuit, I think basically how all these work is like a bunch of individual states get together and they sue. And if the federal DOJ wants to also join that suit and pull resources, they can. So I don't know necessarily how much like the president matters in these cases. Like the Google lawsuit could have happened like with or without the DOJ, probably. I think I'm not like super duper legal expert, um, but I don't know how much necessarily like the executive branch matters here. Um, but yeah. Also, Obama could have done this. You can say that about a lot of things. There's a lot of things, um, you know. But yeah, definitely in interesting times, and definitely interesting, like whether or not like how much power the executive branch here has. Whatever happens after the election will probably impact this a little bit, maybe impact a lot of things, but
I expect so, if for no other reason than, um, eh, in theory, let's just say the election plays out in the, I'm going to say the least interesting possible ways, and it ends up with either, um, Kamala Harris as president, or it ends up with Trump. Um, if it ends up with Trump, obviously, one of the things he's already said he's going to do is tear apart Google and Microsoft and a couple of other big tech companies. That's been part of his actual platform, is that he's going to just go in by hand, walk in their front door, and rip them apart like pieces of paper or something. Um, and uh, if it's Kamala, I mean, how much does the executive branch really control this stuff? Well, she picks the prosecutors. Or, well, she picks who's going to head up the DOJ. And she could certainly put in somebody different who is even more of a bulldog. She could, uh, again, she is a prosecutor. She might have her own opinion on how to push some of this stuff. And while the president doesn't control the DOJ, I mean, they do to a degree, but not entirely.
right.
She obviously she can nudge them in a direction of like, hey, here's a thing that needs to happen. And the DOJ can really, really be a bulldog if that's what it takes. So, I wouldn't rule out that possibility if that becomes politically expedient.
So gonna be interesting what happens here. Um, yeah.
Indeed. Oh boy. Are you tired?
Yeah. Yeah, I want food.
Yeah, I have not really eaten, and I barely slept, so I think I've hit my limits as well. So, Corbin, anything you would like to promote, pitch, talk about? Ponder.
I will say one thing I'm working on at the moment, which is kind of fun, is I have a web app called Image Share, that I released a couple of years ago, and it's a way to upload images from like low end and legacy web browsers. And I'll put this in the YouTube chat. I did recently switch it to. I'm in the process of rewriting it from PHP to Node.js because I hate PHP. It sucks. I hate working in it. And I just switched the live site, which I put in the YouTube description, which is theimageshare.com, over to the new rewritten version, and it's still not done yet, and there's like some bugs I need to work out, but that's been fun to work on. Basically, you upload an image, and it gives you a QR code for you to scan on a modern device, and that's how you can transfer the image. And I've done a lot of work to like test it in a bunch of legacy web browsers. I got IE installed on the Mac Mini back there. It works on it was originally intended for the 3DS because Nintendo had their official service when it was online was a thing where you could upload an image to either, I think it was either Twitter or Facebook, and there were no other options. So I was like, it'd be cool to make one that like you can upload to other places too. And mine was better because it loaded way faster. And then eventually, like the Twitter and Facebook logins stopped working on the 3DS, and then like Nintendo just fully shut the thing down. So Nintendo is not interested in infrastructure for the 3DS anymore, but I am. So I'm mostly maintaining it out of spite. Like I'm gonna keep it working because I'm cool. But yeah, my goal is to with the rewrite is to make it just like a lot more future proof. There's been issues where I was originally using Imgur, however you want to say that, for images, but then they started blocking the main server, so I had to switch to img.bb or imgbb. There's not a dot. But then their API is going like paid, so that's not really an option anymore. So I've done a lot of work where the image uploading is handled entirely on the server, and then it's just deleted after a couple minutes after you've copied it. And it also generates the QR code to scan entirely itself. So end goal here is to have something that won't break randomly anymore, because something is randomly broken here like once a year as long as I've been running this, and like I kept meaning to do something about it, but then I'd forget it and then it breaks again. So no more breaking is the goal. And then the next goal is making it super easy to self-host. Like it'd be cool if this was just like on Docker Hub, because it's a Docker app, so like you could just download it and run it at home. Like you don't even need the website. Yeah. So, and then also it's not just for the 3DS, so I want it to be kind of like a general website tool you can use on a bunch of old computers and game consoles and stuff. Like I've been doing a lot of testing on it with like the Power Mac behind me, and like making sure like that's just a nice thing to like. I have like a screenshot or something on the very old Mac I need to get on my modern computer. How can I do that quickly? Well, scanning a QR code is pretty easy. So yeah, that's been a fun project, and also trying to do like web development in a way that works on 20-year-old web browsers that don't support SSL. I'm learning once again how many weird like display properties IE did not support. Everyone was very late.
All of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff. Like it didn't support. I forget what it was, but it has like one column like on desktop. Well, like for web browsers that don't support like responsive layouts, I just have it in one column. But like it was supposed to be a narrow thing that's centered, and like IE wouldn't center it, but other browsers would. So to do like weird, like other CSS stuff, it's fun. But yeah, end goal is a cool like web app for retro, outdated stuff. So yeah, again, you can try it out. The link is in the chat. It's imageshare.com, and you can tell me if you notice something's broken. It's kind of broken right now. I'm still working on it.
For shame, releasing broken stuff. How dare you?
Yeah, I did. The PHP one was getting very unreliable with the API randomly breaking. So in this case, I did pull the switch, and I switched the site over to the partially working one, because it's mostly not working in that it's missing features, and I don't handle some errors well. The actual uploading should work, I think. So.
Okay. Cool. Well, let's see. I will be Back this weekend for some gaming, some Fall Guys, some probably Overwatch. We'll see. I got to get through a little bit more in order to clear the end of the battle pass, so probably gonna try for that. Let's see. And next week we'll be back for some RambleCast, and I don't know if there's anything big coming up, but we'll see. Carson, gonna be morning at least through this weekend. I need to actually sit down and look at the weather and make sure there's no hot days expected, but I'm pretty sure very soon I'm gonna switch back to evenings. Which I know some people like, some people don't like. At this stage, I'm even kind of toying with the idea of maybe doing mornings with one game and then evenings with another. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so, huge thanks to everyone for coming by, hanging out, being part of the conversation, talking to us in the chat. And, of course, huge thanks to Kirby Mermaid, Austin, Carson, David, and Diablo. Y'all are awesome and excellent supporters of the channel. And for those who would like to support the channel, there are links down below to Cash App, Streamlabs, and Patreon. Kirby, yeah, honestly, that's kind of the direction I'm thinking about going, is some Fall Guys in the mornings, maybe Overwatch 2 in the evenings, possibly, like, also splitting services, so Fall Guys goes on YouTube and Overwatch 2 on Twitch kind of a thing, just because then I don't have to worry as much about muting what people say, because Twitch basically doesn't enforce rules like that. They only enforce rules when they're getting sued. So yeah, so anyway, I think that's about it. So again, thank you all for coming by, hanging out, and I will catch you in the next one. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.